Today, we are diving deep into the mind of one of history's most undefeated commanders, a guy named Alexander Suvorov. We're going to explore a really radical philosophy of leadership and victory, one that argues that true power, well, it isn't found in numbers or in status, but in something far more fundamental: speed and care.
He came to this incredible realization. The only way to never lose a single battle, and we're talking over 60 engagements, wasn't to have more soldiers than the enemy. No, it was to have the only army in the world that moved so fast and cared so much that the victory was already decided long before the fighting even began. This idea it's so counterintuitive. It completely rejects centuries of military doctrine, and it suggests that the most lethal weapon on any battlefield is a leader's disciplined concern for their people.
So this idea really captures his defining moment. I want you to picture this. It's 1799. You're Alexander Suvorov, and you are trapped at a place called the Devil's Bridge, surrounded by the French army in the freezing Swiss Alps. Every single military textbook would tell you to dig in, right? Establish a defensive line, protect your forces. But Suvorov, he saw things completely differently. He didn't see a trap, he saw an opening. He decided the best move wasn't to stand still, but to launch this aggressive, rapid march right through the snow. He literally weaponized speed and momentum, believing that ultimate authority comes from controlling the spirit of your soldiers. This was the birth of the Suvorov Rule, the systematic belief that your care for the individual is your most powerful strategic weapon. But how does a person even arrive at a conclusion that radical?
To really get the rule, we have to get the man. And his philosophy, well, it wasn't born in some fancy classroom or royal court. It was forged in the isolation of his youth, born from a place of what everyone else saw as weakness, which would become his greatest strength.
Before he was this legendary generalissimo, Alexander was a puny, sickly child. And in a world that prized physical strength, especially for a military family, he was just seen as too weak. His only sanctuary? His father's library. But this wasn't a retreat from the world, it was a forge. Surrounded by the histories of Caesar and Alexander the Great, he developed what you could call an analytical hunger. He realized his body wasn't going to save him, so his mind had to. He started to see that the traditions of the aristocratic officer class, they were often just a cover for a lack of real understanding. So he was an insider by birth, but a total outsider by physique, and that gave him this unique perspective to see the truth.
So what did he do? He chose the hardest path you can possibly imagine. Instead of just accepting an officer's commission because of his family name, he enlisted as a private. He deliberately subjected himself to the soul-crushing weight of starting at the absolute bottom. Why? He needed to understand the logic of the rank, the unfiltered reality of the common soldier. So when the 7 Years' War kicked off in 1756, he entered it with a documented refusal to be comfortable. He wanted efficiency, not status. The isolation and the lack of recognition in the barracks, it didn't break him. He used that grind to build an internal fortress, a deep, deep understanding of what soldiers truly needed to succeed.
And this just brilliantly illustrates the two roads available at the time. You had the traditional officer class, obsessed with status, managing from a safe distance. Their training was all about looking good on the parade ground. Suvorov rejected all of it. He chose efficiency over status, proximity over distance. He embraced the messy, difficult logic of the rank, because he knew that's where true victory was actually forged. He was systematically unlearning the habits of the aristocracy to find a permanent, battle-tested truth.
So his authority wasn't just granted by a title. It was earned, in the barracks, in the cold, and on the march, by proving he was willing to stand right there in the mud and the snow without a general's tent to protect him. He built this foundation of trust that no aristocratic officer could ever hope to achieve. He learned that your care for your people, that's the only thing that doesn't lie. And from these brutal early years, a complete philosophy of power began to emerge.
This whole experience built into what he would formally call the science of victory. And this wasn't just a collection of battlefield tactics. No, it was a complete worldview, a new way of understanding power, leadership, and human potential.
This quote, this is the absolute heart of his philosophy. You gotta remember, at a time when military strategy was almost entirely a numbers game, who's got more cannons, more men, more supplies, Suvorov made this radical declaration. He argued that victory isn't about resources, it's about ability. It's about skill, speed, and spirit. It's all about knowing how. He realized that treating a soldier as just another number on a spreadsheet was the fastest way for a commander to lose their true power. His mindset really rested on three core pillars. First, offensive momentum. His whole strategy was to stay in constant motion, to just keep pressing forward until the enemy's plan became undeniably clear through their reactions. Second, radical paternalism. Now this is a profound idea. He held this disciplined belief that your work as a leader is only as good as the safety and well-being you provide for your team. Their security is the measure of your success. And third, the truth laboratory. He saw the military camp not as a place for mindless discipline and parade drills, but as a laboratory, a place for discovering the truth about his men, his methods, and himself.
But look, a philosophy is useless if it just stays in your head, right? Suvorov was an absolute master of turning his mindset into tangible daily systems. He actually engineered a process to build the kind of army that could execute his vision. This is where we see the practical how of his genius.
He implemented what he called the Triad Protocol. It was this rigorous three-part system. First up, the march. Constant motion wasn't just about getting from point A to point B. It was a tool to force physical and mental clarity. Second, the Health Audit. He had a documented habit of making sure every single one of his troops was a sovereign, capable unit, healthy, supplied, and mentally prepared. And third, the bayonet drill. He believed that mastering the fundamental technical details was the absolute key to dismantling the chaos of battle. It built muscle memory and confidence, turning fear into focused action.
30 miles. That's how far his men often marched in a single day. This wasn't just about endurance, it was a strategic weapon. He engineered his army to move at a speed his enemies literally couldn't comprehend. By the time they even reacted, Suvorov's forces were already in a superior position. He made speed itself the primary assault, making sure it was the first and only thing the enemy ever felt.
And underpinning this entire kinetic system was his paternal model, which he practiced through a habit of foundational care. This was a systematic, daily refusal of aristocratic comforts. He slept on the ground on a bed of straw. He ate the exact same food as his men. It was a sensory, rhythmic habit designed to force loyalty to be real, not just demanded. So while other commanders were out there chasing glory and rank, Suvorov was focused on a singular goal: victory without loss. This deep, foundational care was the engine of his entire war machine.
So, what was the result of this lifelong commitment to these pretty radical ideas? Well, it was a complete transformation, not just of a sickly boy into a legendary commander, but of the very rules of warfare itself. For centuries, this was the unquestioned belief. The side with the bigger army, the more cannons, and the larger treasury would inevitably win. It was a simple, brutal calculus that dominated all of European military thought. Suvorov's entire career was basically a systematic demolition of that myth. He proved over and over and over again that a smaller, faster, better trained, and more motivated force could defeat a larger, slower, and more bureaucratic one. His legacy is this undeniable truth. War, and maybe any great undertaking, is ultimately an ability game. It's about what you can do, not just what you have.
And this might be his most profound contribution. He totally transformed the concept of the commander. The boy from the library created a new moral conscience for warfare. He showed that win without losing men wasn't some soft humanitarian ideal. It was a hard, structural weapon. A commander who truly cared for his soldiers would have a loyal, resilient, and unstoppable force. That starving army in the Alps became the most important fighting force in Europe because of this principle. And that's a lesson that extends far beyond the battlefield.
Okay, so Suvorov's journey is this incredibly powerful guide for anyone who feels limited by their circumstances, whether they're physical, social, or professional. It gives us a really clear roadmap for turning a disadvantage into a strategic advantage.
So I want you to think about this for a moment. What is your devil's bridge? Where in your work or in your life have you been choosing the defensive position? Where have you been sacrificing quality or momentum or potential just to stay safe? Suvorov teaches us that sometimes the safest path is actually the one that looks the most aggressive, the one that requires a full commitment to speed, skill, and care.
His life is just a testament to this principle. Your power is directly tied to your ability to stop endlessly spending your resources, your time, your energy, and your money, and start mastering your systems. When you build effective, repeatable systems based on core principles, you stop being a victim of the odds, and you start becoming the master of the outcome.
Ultimately, this is the Suvorov Rule. Victory in any field isn't something that just happens to you. It's a choice. It's a choice you make through your actions, your systems, and your principles. And the foundation of it all, the secret code to unlocking your own greatness, is the level of care you bring to your work and to the people around you. That's the lesson from the boy in the library who completely remade the art of war.